Hi, everybody. Hey, today I have an exciting guest. We've got Bryan Hughes with us from Rattlesnake Solutions. Hey, Bryan, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Hey, what's going on beside you and behind you and all of that?
I'm in our room where we keep a lot of the rattlesnakes that we have. We have every rattlesnake species in Arizona. So we do a lot of education work with these animals. We have some conservation work that we do as
Wow.
well. And it's also just the room that 10-year-old me would really, really want. So I'm happy to figure
how,
it out.
how many species are there in
There
Arizona?
are 15 species. If you 13 is also a good answer. It just depends on how you accept or don't a certain paper that came out 20
Okay.
years ago. But we have a lot. We have more species here in Arizona than any other state, and we actually have more species just in Phoenix alone than almost every state has. So certainly more than any other city, Phoenix is really where it's
Wow.
at.
So tell me a little bit about what you do. What does Rattlesnake Solutions do? I know that you go out and wrangle snakes and protect people, homeowners that have found snakes in their yard, but what else do you guys do?
Yeah, so homeowners that live on the edge of the valley, they're going to get rattlesnakes in your yard occasionally, and we've worked out a number of things that we can do to help that. From very direct help, which is to have we have a 24-hour hotline that someone can call and have someone at their house right away to catch a snake. But really, more importantly, we're looking at the property to see why is that snake there to begin with? What things can be changed in the yard or the landscaping that would make it so that rattlesnakes are less likely to come in there. And also, just making people informed. It's people don't like snakes, and people are scared of them very much. And
Sure.
any other phobia, the more that you know about it, the smaller and more manageable that fear becomes.
So what do you tell homeowners? I know you because you've been in this area a ton. I live in Fireside in Norterra,
Mhm.
and we're right here, off the
Every
preserve. So
day.
we've had a lot of snakes in yards, and we have children and pets and all of those kinds of things. But what attracts them to certain areas?
So in some places, you can't really do much to help it. It's just where you're at. You live in an area where there's some through traffic,
Right.
right? So any place that's right up against the edge of the desert, then you could have your yard be completely xeriscape and have no plants and still see a snake occasionally just because of where you're at. But
Mhm.
in most cases, we see that the landscaping and the way that certain features on the property are made make them so they're useful habitat for snakes. And that's really what you have to look at your yard as. It's habitat, it's food opportunities, water, and very importantly, shelter. So things like the default favorite of every new community is lantana. That bush is
Mhm.
just everywhere,
Yeah.
right? It's also the top snake or the top plant that I've pulled thousands and thousands of rattlesnakes out of over the years because they they tend to drop a lot of leaf litter. They tend to be overwatered, things like that. So landscaping and access to the property that makes it so it's useful to wildlife is really the thing to look for to keep rattlesnakes out of the yard.
Okay. And then a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about, because there are lots and lots and lots of misconceptions. I mean, I've heard people say, like in old cowboy movies, Bryan, you put a rope around the perimeter and they won't cross a rope. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Um, do you find that once a rattlesnake has entered your yard, and if somebody tried to relocate it and not too far away, are they going to return to your yard? Is that a misconception? Because I've heard that before, that, oh no, once that snake is there, it's going to come right back.
It is complicated, and really the answer lies in is if it's done properly, then that's not something to worry about. So I'm going to pick on the fire department, which doesn't make me a lot of friends in the long run, But
Okay.
so if your fire department does this very often, where they catch a snake and throw it over the fence, snake comes right back every
Mm-hmm.
time, right? Except now
Mm-hmm.
it's also injured because the tools aren't used very often. The
Right.
problem with that is not the snake is not coming back because it has an irresistible urge to be in your yard, or even because it's territorial and thinks that that's its home. It's because the snakes are trying to stay alive. So if it's a hot day outside and they throw it over the fence, it's like trying to go check the mail barefoot. They panic and they go back to what they know. If they're in the wrong spot, they freak out and they try to get back to something familiar, even if it's dangerous to them. So what we do when we're doing a relocation is we work with something called, it's actually something that I study. It's temporal microhabitat selection, which is the fancy way of saying I know which hole to put them into. which bush they should go into, and how that changes throughout the year.
Ah,
So a snake that is in your yard that is looking for something, let's say that it's found a great place to hunt by your grill.
right.
Has nothing to do with that it likes barbecue, right? It has to do that it's had success there hunting before.
Ah,
So we would be putting it into a spot out in the desert that has the same qualities to it, has some places that it can go hide and kind of reestablish itself. And then the second half of that is to work with the homeowner to tell them that, hey, this snake is here because your grill has a bunch of rodents living under it. So it doesn't matter if the snake were to try to come back, even if it did, it would find that the thing that brought it there to begin with and causes it to stay is no longer there. It's now useless to them. So there's really a lot of factors into it, but a blanket statement that if you relocate a snake, it's just going to come back, it's very much false.
false. Okay. And then another thing is, a lot of people want to know, how high do snakes actually climb? I mean, when it comes to securing your yard, your backyard, and most of us have gates. So, how far up do you need to seal, say, a gate, or if you have a view fence? What are your thoughts on that?
So we did a lot of testing this winter. That's actually something I spent a lot of my time doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is 36 inches. You can
Okay.
get away with 30 inches too. The way that we came to that number is we got a number of rattlesnakes, the largest ones you can get in Arizona, and we even imported one from Texas, so it's a little bit larger in the area, at 5 feet. So there's a couple of things here I have to say about those tests too, is that, people are not good at judging the size of things. If someone says they saw a 7-foot rattlesnake out there, it was 4 feet.
Yeah,
So
right.
tape measures have a way of shrinking snakes as soon as they appear. Anyway, the snakes tend to climb up about half of their body length or a little bit less before they give up. And it's not just a matter of will. They're not made to climb. Some can climb, but they're not great at climbing. They're made for a life on the ground. So half the body length of the largest rattlesnake you're going to see in any area, plus a little bit of a buffer, maybe 6 inches, that puts you at 30 inches, or 36 inches we keep at a 5-foot rattlesnake. We tested with 2-inch, which is a lot of HOAs require 24-inch size mesh, or even 18. No rattlesnake of even medium size had any problem climbing straight over that stuff.
Okay.
So it needs to be complete. It has to be all the way around the property, or else you're just kind of making a really good snake trap.
Right.
So
and there are other snakes, though, that can climb. They're known to be able to climb higher than that. But we, specifically are talking rattlesnakes. I have one, not a rattlesnake, but I don't know what type of snake it was, but I, knew it wasn't a rattlesnake. And it was just laying out, getting a little sun on the top of my fence. So
yeah, good
obviously
point.
climbed.
Yeah, so gopher snakes, king snakes, coach whips, those climb trees and eat birds. They can sit in the corner like a 90-degree angle on stucco and go up it. They're built differently. They're a little more athletic. It's important, if you're looking into getting snake fencing and that kind of thing, make sure it's good to understand that there's a difference between things that are dangerous and things that might be scary or you don't want to look at.
Right.
We're really trying to focus on keeping rattlesnakes out. And if you have anybody that's promising that they can do something that will keep all types of snakes out, absolutely, they're not telling the truth about that.
Okay, interesting. And you do the snake fencing. That's also part of what your company does. You guys will show up and relocate a snake for a homeowner, but then you'll also walk the perimeter and kind of talk homeowners through what they need to do in order to secure the perimeter of their home.
Yeah, that's the most sound and the best way to keep rattlesnakes out of an area, is just to take all the guesswork out of it and put in something that is a physical barrier that they just can't get into. So rattlesnake fencing is the best way to do that. When we're looking at it, we are using the biology and the physiology and the behavior of rattlesnakes to determine things like the height, how small it needs to be, how to attach certain features to certain areas so that they just can't come in.
Right. So what do you recommend if somebody sees a snake in their yard? What should they do?
So the first thing to do is, if possible, determine if it's a harmless or harmful snake or not. Basically, if it doesn't have a rattle, it's nothing to worry about, including coral snakes. They are venomous, but they don't really, they're not a dangerous thing. There's a difference there.
Okay.
If it's something that is harmful, if it is a rattlesnake, then it would be appropriate to call somebody to come in and remove it. And also, very importantly, figure out why it's there. And even if it is a random event, if it's just something that's there because of you live right next to the mountain, it's important to know the difference between, okay, I bought this house on the corner up by the mountain. I should expect to see a rattlesnake or two every year.
Right.
Versus, okay, I've seen 5 rattlesnakes here this month. Something is up. What is up? So ask those questions.
You know, as a rule of thumb for me, because here's what I know about snakes, is they always show up when you least expect it.
Yeah.
So it scares you always, you know. And I just try to look, you know, if I go out the front door. A lot of us don't use our front doors anymore. So I know that snakes like to kind of hang around in little corners on people's patios.
They're trying to stay cool. So they're cold-blooded, and there's a comment I see people say quite often, as soon as it starts hitting, like this week, triple digits, right?
Right.
Where, okay, it's hot out, more like the snakes just love heat. It's actually the opposite. They spend a lot of their life trying to stay cool. 105-degree body temperature is lethal to a lot of rattlesnakes. So just imagine living out here with that.
Yeah, so they're looking for shady places.
Shady places. So plants that offer shade, caves like a garage that's poorly sealed, things like that.
Right. And, you know, lastly, I wanted to ask you about, is this also a myth? Because I've heard from people that hike, you know, we have lots of trails in the area, and people that are out hiking and they say, oh my gosh, there's certain snakes now that are not alerting you. So they're not rattling and they're just striking, and you have no idea that, you know, they were in a bush close to where you were about to walk. What are your
the idea that things are changing in that direction, that's a myth.
Okay.
It's just confirmation bias. If you see a snake that's silent and then you just heard on the news that there's new silent snakes evolving, then okay, well, there you go. Here's a silent snake. That must be true. It's a weird story that popped up that's been, you know, there's really no evidence to support it at all. In reality, rattlesnakes they don't rattle all that much. And if you step on one, you know, they don't have a forced order of operations they go through. If you step on a rattlesnake, it can bite directly from that situation and never choose to rattle at all. It's a decision that they make to try to scare something away. So. And
how far can they strike? Because that's another myth. I've heard, you know, half their length. I've heard twice their length. You know.
It's about half to 2/3 of their body distance. Predatory strikes are a little bit longer. The defensive ones tend to be these little short jabs. And you will get people that say that they saw a rattlesnake jump through the air, you know, 5 or 6 feet and strike. I hear that sometimes. It's not possible for them to do that. Their bodies are not built that way. It's like saying that I could punch so hard that I go flying to the other end of a room.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
It's not possible.
And there's something about, you know, we say that only people that are scared of snakes get chased by snakes. And if you're less scared you are of snakes, the more reasonable they seem to act towards you. And that's all about perception. If you're scared of snakes and have an idea of what rattlesnakes are going to do if you see them, that can affect your perception of them. You can actually see something that is faster and larger and remember that, even if it wasn't the case. So, you know, anyone that feels that way, look up some psychology studies about what happens when you see a snake or a spider. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, my blood pressure rises and I want to just run when I see a snake.
It does weird things to your eyes. It's a strange thing, but you know, I'm around rattlesnakes every single day of my life, in the wild and otherwise. Never been chased by one. Never had one jump at me.
Right.
And there's some people that every single snake they see, it's this life or death saga, you know. So
right.
Perception is the difference there.
Sure. All right, Bryan. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know you are, you know, known around the entire valley as, you know, should I call you the snake wrangler?
Sure. We talk about snakes a lot.
The snake wrangler. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for the tips. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks.
All right, Bryan. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Bye.